Hi, today I am demonstrating the ER diagram. Entity is a person, a place, and an object, an event, or a concept in the user environment about which the organization wishes to maintain data. Example of these entities would be employee, store, machine, cell, account. An entity type is a collection of entities that share common properties or characteristics. Here are some examples of entity type: book, VHS, DVD. They are the entity type to the entity object. Entity instance is a single occurrence of an entity type. Right here we have an example of an employee entity type that has two entity instances, Michelle and David. Weak entity is an entity that cannot be uniquely identified by its attributes alone. Therefore, it must need a strong entity to identify it. A strong entity is an entity that exists independently of other types. In this diagram, employee is a strong entity type with identifier employee ID. Dependent is a weak entity type which has doubled line rectangle. Attribute is a property or a characteristic of an entity or relationship type that is of interest to the organization. All of these are attributes for the entity customer. Classifications of attributes: optional, required, composite, multi-value, derived attribute. Required attribute is an attribute that must have a value for every entity instance with which it is associated. Option attribute is an attribute that may not have a value for every entity instance with which it is associated. In this example, it shows student entities with their respective attribute values. The only optional attribute for student is major. The rest are required attributes. Composite attribute is an attribute that has meaningful component parts. In this diagram, composite attributes for employee entity is the employee address, and the address is broken into component parts, which is street and city. Multi-value attribute may take on more than one value for a given entity instance. Derived attribute is the values that can be calculated from related attribute values. In this employee entity example, skill is multi-valued. An employee can have more than one skill. Years employed are the derived attribute. It calculated from date employed and current date. Next, we move on to relationship type. It is a meaningful association between entity types. Relationship instance is an association between entity instances where each relationship instance associates exactly one entity instance from each participating entity type. In this example, employee and course, the line in between this two entity type is the relationship type. On the bottom, each line represents an instance of the complete relationship type.